The stars had always been silent. The elder species called it reverence, believing the quiet between systems held sacred truths. For millennia, they whispered stories of a war that would end everything. A final reckoning. Not myth, not metaphor, a prophecy. They had names for it in every ancient tongue. The Drenathi carved it into their moonstones. The Vale sang it during their blood rites. The Cathel kept it locked behind 1,000 neural vaults, and all of them pointed to the same fate. It would not be the machines, not entropy, not even time. It would be them, the species born of dirt and radiation, the ones who laughed in pain and bled with their fists clenched, the broken flame, humans. They weren't supposed to matter. No claws, no armor, no psychic reach, just soft flesh and ugly emotions. Anger, grief, hunger. The so-called civilized races of the galaxy laughed at them, until the laughter stopped, until the galaxy caught fire. He stood quietly on the command deck of the Resolute Dawn, watching the ruins of Vessery Prime through the observation glass. Entire continents turned to molten slag, a once glorious capital, now a glowing grave. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He only watched. The crew worked around him, silent, efficient, worn thin by war. Every man and woman aboard that ship had buried someone, on Earth, on colonies that no longer existed, on outposts where help never came. That grief had shaped them, hardened them, made them impossible to break. "Status," he asked, his voice rough, like gravel rolled in fire. "Visari systems are offline," someone replied. "We've begun recovery of enemy records. No survivors." He gave a slow nod. No triumph, just certainty. They had come not to conquer. They had come to end. The Galactic Assembly was watching. Dozens of alien empires tuned in from their jeweled towers and floating citadels. They'd called him a savage, a barbarian in a ship. Now they were seeing the cost of their arrogance. "Open the line," he ordered. The view screen lit up with a mosaic of leaders, glittering, robed, armored, glistening with biology that Earth science barely understood. They had ruled the stars for ages, but they had never faced this. He stepped forward slowly, hands behind his back, voice controlled. "You watched Earth burn. You offered nothing. You called us unstable, dangerous. You laughed when we begged for inclusion, mocked our desperation. You locked us out of your pretty halls." A pause. Not dramatic, just final. "You should have killed us." The room on the other end of the broadcast shifted uncomfortably. One of the diplomats, a translucent being from the core void, attempted to speak, but stopped. They were all afraid to say the wrong thing. And now they were too late to say the right one. He leaned in, letting them see the burn scars along his neck. Proof of what they'd done, of who made him. "We are not asking any more. We're taking." He ended the transmission. The screen flickered to black. Silence fell over the bridge once again. But it was not peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after a funeral, when there's nothing left to mourn. Far beyond, on a distant temple world drowned in red sand, the last living oracle of the Yareth bent her fragile frame before a dying flame. She whispered the line passed down through her people's blood for generations. "He shall rise without name, without mercy. From the ashes of his people he shall wield their screams like fire, and the stars will forget their gods." The fire flickered out, and in the darkness the stars began to burn. The war wasn't over. Not even close. Visari Prime was just a message, one written in fire and orbital glass. But it wasn't meant for the Dominion alone. It was for the galaxy. A single sentence shouted into the void. "We remember what you did." He stood in the war room now, lights low, the hum of the ship pulsing through the metal floor beneath his boots. The Resolute Dawn was a monster in its own right. Earth's first dreadnought built entirely from salvaged alien tech and repurposed wreckage. Every part of it had history. Some of it screamed. Around the central table, the officers gathered. Not a uniform among them matched. One wore a torn mining vest, another still had bloodstains on his collar. These were not trained tacticians. They were survivors, leaders carved by loss. One of them, a gray-haired woman with a prosthetic eye, leaned forward. "The Dravari are pulling fleets from Sector 9. Assembly chatter says they're preparing defensive positions near the cradle systems." He didn't respond right away. He just stared at the table, where a glowing map of the galaxy rotated slowly. 1,000 stars. 1,000 betrayals. "They think they're preparing," someone muttered. "They're stalling," said another. "Trying to coordinate a response. Maybe even negotiate." The man raised his head. His eyes, cold and sharp, scanned the table. "They won't negotiate. Not really. They'll offer us a seat right before they pull the trigger." Silence followed, because they all knew he was right. He moved to the edge of the table and tapped a system on the outer rim. "Varnus 3, Assembly Logistics Hub. Minimal defense. That's our next move." A younger officer frowned. "That's not a war target. That's a supply route." The man looked up slowly. "Good." This wasn't just about battles. This was about collapse. The same kind humanity had tasted when the Assembly embargoed Earth 2 decades ago, when their medicine was denied, their trade routes blocked, their people left to die on dying worlds while the Assembly debated protocol. Now it was humanity's turn to decide who got to eat, who got to breathe. The crew dispersed, orders given, coordinates locked. As the ship began turning toward its next destination, he walked the upper corridors alone, passing rows of cryopods, munitions lockers, and repair stations filled with half-wrecked drones. Everything around him felt like it was held together by grief and rage. He paused near the memorial wall. It stretched across one side of the corridor, etched names of the fallen, lit by soft blue glow. Thousands of them, soldiers, civilians, children. Some had no last names, just ID numbers from destroyed settlements. His fingers brushed one of the names. She had been 9. He remembered her eyes, bright, angry, the way she'd kicked his leg the first time they met. He hadn't cried when she died, but he had never forgiven the ones responsible. A voice crackled in over the comms. "Jump prep complete. All systems green. We're ready." He didn't answer right away, just stared at the wall, then finally softly, "Jump." The stars stretched, warped, and disappeared into the dark as the ship tore a hole through the void. Behind them, Visari Prime smoldered. Ahead, Varnus 3 waited, oblivious to the fire approaching. Far across the stars, in the cold chambers of the Assembly, the oldest among them gathered in secret. The ones who remembered the first breach of the veil. The ones who had seen the prophecy carved into the minds of the ancients. One leaned forward, his breath slow, words trembling. "The Nameless One marches. The flame has teeth, and it is coming for us all." And yet they still believed they had time. They didn't. Varnus 3 didn't stand a chance. The colony wasn't built for war. It was built for logistics. Endless fields of solar rigs, orbital warehouses, gravity-suspended cargo lanes weaving like veins through low orbit. Clean, efficient, peaceful, and completely unprepared. The Resolute Dawn tore through the outer defense net in 6 minutes. By the time their orbital platforms activated, 3 were already disabled, and the 4th detonated from inside, sabotaged by human operatives planted there 2 months prior. There were no warnings, no demands, no ultimatums, just the flash of rail fire in the atmosphere and the rumble of falling debris. From the bridge, the man watched in silence. The crew executed the plan with ruthless precision. Dropships deployed in coordinated waves. EMP pulses blacked out planetary comms. Skirmisher units landed, not to conquer, but to dismantle. To erase the arteries of supply the assembly had relied on for decades. "They're scattering," the sensor chief said, eyes wide. "Multiple freighters trying to break orbit. Civilian tags." "Mark them," he replied. "Target engines only." One by one, the fleeing ships were crippled, not destroyed, just stopped, made to sit and watch as the symbol of assembly stability crumbled around them. That was the message. He stepped away from the command deck and entered the elevator shaft, descending into the dropship bay. He didn't lead from above. He never had. He led by walking into fire first. The launch doors hissed open, wind howling in from the planet below. The sky was thick with smoke and burning debris, but the dropships were moving with terrifying unity, like a school of sharks programmed to feed. He stepped into the nearest one without a word, strapping in beside a hardened woman with a plasma scald across her neck. She glanced at him, then looked away. Everyone on the dropship knew who he was and what he carried, not his name. That didn't matter anymore. But what he represented, that did. The broken flame, the prophecy made flesh, the walking answer to centuries of silence and injustice. As the dropship descended, a sudden tremor rocked it hard, an explosion just beneath them. "We're taking ground fire," the pilot shouted. "Someone got desperate." "Fly lower," he ordered, voice calm. "They won't shoot through their own hospitals." The pilot hesitated, then obeyed. They leveled out just meters above rooftops, skimming smoke columns and shattered towers. He saw the chaos below. Panicked civilians, fleeing officials, unarmed guards tossing down rifles in surrender. Some pointed at the sky, recognizing the shape of the dawn overhead. Panic spread faster than fire. When the dropship touched down, he was the first to step off. The air was thick and acrid. Every breath was coated in ash. Still, he moved forward, boots crunching glass and scorched soil beneath him. A small assembly official, wounded and trembling, stumbled from the wreckage of a transit station. His uniform was singed, his ornate shoulder emblems half melted. He raised both hands, lips quivering. "Please, I surrender. We had no part in the embargo. I wasn't even born when it happened." He stopped. The man looked down at him, not with rage, not with hate, but with judgment. "You were born into it," he said quietly. "You lived under its protection. You looked away while we starved." The official dropped to his knees, sobbing. I didn't know. You didn't want to know." He turned and walked past without giving the order to shoot. Let the man live with it. Sometimes punishment didn't come with fire. Sometimes it came in silence. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, the crew began uploading assembly data caches taken from Varnus 3's mainframe. Names, routes, hidden supply chains, all of it exposed. He stood in the center of the data room as the lights dimmed and new information lit the air like constellations. "We have our next targets," someone said. He didn't nod. He just stared at the flickering system maps, seeing not planets, but tombstones waiting to be carved. In the dark corners of the galaxy, deep within temples and dying ruins, the last remaining memory keepers recited the same line. "He wears no crown, no name, only fire, and he walks without stopping." And true to the prophecy, he did not stop. The galaxy had begun to whisper in fear. What started as isolated panic in outer systems was now crawling toward the core. Trade networks flickered. Borders lost definition. And for the first time in centuries, assembly-controlled sectors began to feel the weight of power slipping through their polished fingers. The war wasn't being fought like before. No grand declarations, no planetary invasions with banners and parades. It was surgical, cruel, and deliberate. He was cutting nerves, not limbs, crippling the body before the final strike to the heart. He stood alone in his quarters now, watching a small holoscreen replay the footage from Varnus 3. Not the destruction, he'd already seen that. He was watching the faces, those few moments before the power died. Fear, confusion, realization. A whisper escaped his lips, not spoken to anyone. Now they understand. A soft chime echoed through the room, a message from intelligence. The Assembly has withdrawn fleets from 10 outer systems, civilian unrest spreading in Cadrelux, Traylan Reach, and even within High Virene. They were retreating inward, pulling back toward their golden walls. Perfect. The door behind him hissed open. The ship's tactical officer entered, a tall, cold-eyed man with cybernetic implants stitched across his skull. "They're holding a summit," he said without ceremony. "Not just the Assembly, all the core species, emergency session, first time in 5 centuries. "When?" 3 days, deep in the Alarian belt, fortified station, full shield dome. "Are we close enough to reach it before then?" A pause. "With a blind jump and full reactor output, yes, we'll arrive hours before it begins." He turned away from the screen. "Prep it." The officer blinked. "You want to attack it?" Number 1 want to speak. Silence lingered, the kind that was heavier than gunfire. "They'll have half the galaxy's elite under one roof. That's not a target, it's bait." "A trap." He nodded. "Let them think it is." The jump was violent. Uncharted hyperspace lanes were raw and unstable, ripped open by brute force algorithms the Assembly had banned long ago. They weren't built for safety. They were built to arrive. The resolute dawn emerged from the rift like a beast clawing out of its cage. Systems flickered, hull plating groaned, and still they came through. They dropped into the shadow of the Alarian station, a massive, glimmering spire suspended above a dwarf star. The dome that covered it shimmered like liquid silver, powered by reactors that could withstand a solar flare. Every scanner lit up in red. Dozens of defense platforms turned. Energy locks buzzed. The station hailed. A high-pitched voice filtered through, staticky with protocol. "Unidentified vessel. You are trespassing on secure diplomatic territory. Power down and prepare for boarding." He stepped onto the bridge. "This is no trespass," he said calmly, voice carried through the open channel. "This is a return." The other end fell silent. Then came a new voice, older, brittle, tired. "We do not wish more blood." He didn't laugh, but something in his eyes did. "Neither did we," he replied. "The last time we asked, you called us savages. You blocked our medicine, watched our children die." There was no answer, just the quiet shame of truth being repeated aloud. "I'll come aboard alone," he said. "No weapons, no soldiers, just me. But if I don't walk back out, the stars around you will burn." The station hesitated. Then the dome cracked open, just enough to let one ship through. He walked the halls of the summit station with heavy steps, every guard flinching as he passed. He was unarmed. He wore no insignia, no badge of office, just scars. And purpose. The chamber doors opened, revealing a room packed with delegates. Hundreds of them. Cloaks, scales, telepathic fields flickering in tension, all of them turned as he entered. He walked straight to the center. No stage, no microphone. He didn't need one. "You want to negotiate," he said, voice echoing. "You want to delay. You want to survive this." No one interrupted. "You spent generations building walls of gold and silence. You pushed us into the dirt. And now, as the dirt rises, you beg for time." He looked around at the terrified, pride-swallowed faces. There will be no peace, not until the last of your arrogance is buried, not until you feel what we felt, not until justice breathes. Then he walked out. No one dared stop him. The summit had lasted 7 minutes, and it would be remembered for 7 centuries. The summit never recovered. What was supposed to be a display of unity became a shrine of silence. The moment he walked out, half the delegates followed, some in panic, some in shame, and a few in stunned reverence. He hadn't made a threat. He had made a prophecy, and they believed it. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, he stood at the observation port, watching the last flickers of the Alarian belt station fade into the distance. It was still intact. No fire, no weapons. But they all knew something had been taken. Their illusion of control. The galaxy's response? He asked, eyes never leaving the stars. Confusion, came the reply. Fear, mostly. A few systems are cutting ties with the Assembly. Virene is threatening secession. The Dravari High Lords have gone dark. Civilian riots across multiple trade hubs. Good, he muttered. Let them tear themselves apart. But even as the plan unfolded, even as the cracks spread through the old order like a disease, something else stirred inside him. Not hesitation. Number, but something colder. He could feel it in his bones, the truth behind the rage. He didn't enjoy this. He just couldn't forgive. His quarters were quiet, sparse. A metal bunk, a small terminal, a locked drawer that hadn't been opened in years. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring at it. Finally, he reached for the drawer. Inside was a worn, folded photo. Old Earth tech. Fragile paper. No digital backups, just ink and memory. The faces smiled. A woman, a child. And himself. Before the scars, before the war, before the name had been burned out of him. He had tried to keep them safe. The Assembly blockade had ensured they starved on the colonies. Their medical shuttles denied clearance, their requests for aid buried in bureaucratic rot. He had buried them with his own hands in soil that could barely grow weeds. That was the day the flame inside him stopped flickering and started burning. A soft knock at the door. He slipped the photo back inside. Enter. The tactical officer stepped in. We've intercepted a secure broadcast. Priority 1 Assembly channel. Play it. A hologram lit up between them. Grainy, damaged, but clear enough. It was a woman. Older, sharp-eyed. Assembly Prime Counselor Nelia Odrin, one of the architects of Earth's isolation. She looked tired. We acknowledge past failures, she said. We accept responsibility for policies that led to suffering. The Assembly offers a full diplomatic restoration to Earth and its colonies. No conditions, full reparations. We seek peace. He didn't blink. She's lying, the officer said. Of course she is, he replied. But it's not for me. The officer tilted his head. Then, who? He stood slowly. It's for them, the rest of the galaxy. She wants to look like the victim when we don't accept. She thinks we still want a seat at their table, the officer added bitterly. He nodded. She doesn't understand. We burned the table. Outside the ship, the stars spun silently. They'd never looked so fragile. Another alert flashed across the console. This one from a forward unit in the outer reach. Emergency transmission. Black code, the officer said. They found it. His head snapped around. The vault? The officer nodded grimly. Coordinates match the data recovered from Varnus 3. It's real. He clenched his fists. The Assembly's secret vault. Hidden beyond known space, it was a legend whispered even in human resistance cells. A place where the Assembly stored its darkest truths, the records, the decisions, the proof of what they did to keep humanity in chains. It was more than history. It was justice. How long to get there? He asked. With the dawn? 12 hours, if we push the core. He turned toward the bridge. Do it, get us there. Because now it wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth. The kind of truth that could burn empires down without a single shot. 12 hours. That was all it took to reach the edge of known space, and yet it felt like crossing centuries. The resolute dawn cut through the void like a blade honed in anger. No resistance, no pursuit. The assembly didn't know they'd found it, yet. Or maybe they did, and silence was the only defense they had left. Either way, it didn't matter, because now he was hunting ghosts. The vault wasn't marked on any stellar chart. No signal, no beacon, not even a whisper of existence. But when the ship came out of jump, there it was, suspended above a dying star, cloaked in fractured light. It was nothing like they expected. It looked ancient. A massive station carved from obsidian alloy, its surface cracked and scorched, covered in layer upon layer of rusted plating. Not assembly style. It was older than that. Older than the assembly itself, maybe. The galaxy's secret shame hiding in something forgotten. He stared at it through the viewport. Scan it, he ordered. Structure's intact, energy signatures weak, no defense grid online, the officer replied. Any life signs? None. He was already moving to the drop bay. This wasn't something to be watched from a bridge. This was something he had to see, to touch, to drag into the light. The boarding shuttle pierced through a gap in the vault's outer shell and latched onto an ancient docking ring. The moment the seal engaged, lights flickered on inside the station. Dim, sickly green, like the place had just remembered it was alive. He stepped through first. The air inside was heavy, recycled far too long. The corridor was curved, tight, filled with strange markings along the walls, symbols not found in any assembly database. This place is older than protocol, muttered one of the Marines behind him. He said nothing, just moved forward, deeper into the dark. Room by room, they uncovered silence. Old tech, archives stored in crystalline cores suspended in anti-grav orbs, but most of it wasn't digital. The assembly had deliberately kept this place unlinked. No wireless systems, no networks. They didn't want anyone hacking the truth. They wanted it buried in walls. Eventually, they reached the central chamber. A circular vault, locked by biometric key and blood seal. The door alone looked like it could survive a supernova. But his team was prepared. They didn't knock. The plasma charges blew the seal in 4 seconds. Inside were rows of black consoles and hollowed-out AI cores. But it wasn't the machines that caught his attention. It was the wall behind them. Lined with memory crystals, thousands of them, all labeled in assembly code. Some dated over 300 years ago. Others older than Earth's first colony ship. And etched above them, in a language only the oldest historians still recognized, were the words, "Judgment must not be witnessed." He stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. One of the Marines activated a crystal at random. A voice echoed from it, calm, cold, procedural. Subject 742, designated human breeding test, Phase 2. Malnutrition parameters initiated. Observation duration, 5 years. Results, decline in birth rate by 63%. Psychological collapse. Conclusion, acceptable attrition. Another was activated. Directive 88, deny access to colonist vaccines. Justification, resource priority. Predicted mortality, 1.2 million. Political backlash, unlikely. Status, approved. He turned slowly, staring at row after row. There it was. Everything they had done, every experiment, every lie, every death wrapped in bureaucratic approval and sterilized language. Proof. The crew looked to him. And for the first time since the war began, he swayed, not from weakness, but from weight. The weight of knowing he wasn't just fighting monsters. He was fighting architects. His voice was low. "Upload everything." One of the techs nodded and connected to the interface. The ship's AI began transferring files, straight to a secure human channel set to broadcast to every remaining independent system. No filters, no edits, just truth. "You sure?" the tech asked. "This'll light the whole galaxy on fire." He looked back at the crystal in his hand. "I'm counting on it." Elsewhere, across the stars, the truth spread like a virus. Screens lit up in marketplaces, military stations, and resistance dens. The footage played without context, without warning. Families watched in horror. Soldiers dropped their rifles. Even assembly citizens wept as they realized what they were part of. The galaxy had been built on rot. And now the rot had a face, a name, number, just a shadow, walking with fire in his chest and ghosts at his back. The one the prophecies warned about, the one who was coming. The galaxy was on fire, not from lasers or warships, but from truth. The vault's files had spread like a plague. Entire populations turned on their leaders. Former assembly allies burned their own flags. Protests erupted on planets where peace had been taken for granted. And in the streets of once loyal worlds, statues of counselors were pulled down and stomped into rubble. The assembly tried to control the damage. They called the files fake, claimed human manipulation. They deployed cleanup teams, scrambled propaganda broadcasts, deployed elite strike forces to contain the panic. It was useless. You couldn't silence a scream once the galaxy had heard it. And he was no longer speaking alone. New fleets rose, human and non-human alike. Survivors of assembly tyranny found their courage in the ashes. Old separatist cells rebranded themselves under one banner: the Broken Flame. A name whispered in fear and now roared in defiance. But the job wasn't finished. The assembly's core remained intact, a fortified cluster of 8 central systems surrounded by dreadnoughts, shielded planets, and propaganda towers still pumping lies into the void. That was where it would end. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, he stood silently, watching the fleet assemble around him. Over 200 ships, scrap-built fighters, modified cargo haulers turned into gunboats, even a few alien cruisers flown by defectors. They weren't uniform, they weren't polished, but they were angry, and that made them powerful. A comm screen opened beside him, revealing a weathered face. Admiral Kovac, one of the oldest voices from Earth's resistance movement. He had a cybernetic jaw and the glare of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You sure about this?" Kovac asked. "They're dug in deep. Core systems haven't fallen in 9 centuries. He didn't blink. "That's because no one ever tried to burn them." Kovac gave a dry laugh. "You sound like a man ready to die." "I died a long time ago. What's left is just the reckoning." The screen closed. He turned to the crew, some of whom had been with him since the first strike, others who joined after seeing the vault. All had the same look in their eyes, something between devotion and fury. "This is it," he said. "We don't negotiate with ghosts. We don't forgive architects. We end it, here, now." The engines roared to life. They reached the core in 6 hours. The assembly was waiting. Dozens of ships fanned out in perfect formation, their hulls painted in gold and blue, shields pulsing like hearts. These were the elite, the last sword and shield of the old order. His fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a scattered burst, ships arranged more like a swarm than an armada. To the assembly, it looked like chaos, but chaos had always been humanity's greatest weapon. The first shot came from the assembly. Predictable, precise. A long-range cannon burst that vaporized a small freighter instantly. They thought fear would follow. It didn't. The fleet surged forward with a scream. Within seconds, the space between them became a storm. Plasma bolts, railgun rounds, boarding pods crashing through shields, EMP waves rolling like tides. The Resolute Dawn cut through the chaos like a harpoon, shields flaring, guns howling. He was on the front lines, not watching, leading. His hands gripped the railing as the ship dove beneath a volley of torpedoes. Crew members shouted over alarms. Hull breaches flared, but they kept moving. "Target their command center," he ordered. "Cripple it, don't destroy it." The ship locked on to a gleaming citadel orbiting the central planet, a structure built to represent peace and order. Now it would serve as a monument to failure. The Dawn's primary cannon fired. The beam tore through the citadel's lower structure, igniting it from within. Towers crumbled, defense systems sputtered, the station drifted, burning but not dead. He watched from the viewport. "You'll live," he whispered, "just long enough to see the end." The assembly ships began breaking ranks. Some fled, some turned on each other, some simply stopped firing, paralyzed by the truth they could no longer ignore. The invincible wall of order shattered in real time. He looked to his crew. "Begin landfall. We take the planet. Not for conquest, for closure." The war was nearly over, but the judgment still had to be delivered. The capital world of the Assembly had once been called Solariad. It was known for its sky bridges that stretched between golden towers, its floating gardens, and its gravity-shielded oceans, an artificial paradise built on centuries of stolen wealth and silenced suffering. For generations, the Assembly had showcased it as proof of galactic civilization. Now, it was shaking. The Resolute Dawn descended through thick clouds of smoke and flak. Assembly air defenses were collapsing under their own weight. Some refused to fire. Others had been sabotaged from within. Ground command centers were gone, replaced by pockets of chaos and mutiny. The planet was eating itself. He stood at the loading ramp of the main drop cruiser, helmet under one arm, rifle in the other. The battle around them was nothing like a traditional siege. There were no lines, no order, just the collapse of a lie centuries in the making, the final purge of the silence that had let so many rot in the dark. As the ramp lowered, hot wind swept through, carrying the sound of sirens and scattered gunfire. He stepped out, boots hitting the marble of an assembly plaza, now cracked and covered in ash. Statues of former counselors loomed overhead, their perfect faces staring down with blind serenity. He lifted his rifle and shot one between the eyes. The stone head shattered, crashing down in pieces. He didn't say a word. They pushed through the central district with ease. Resistance was minimal. A few security bots activated out of reflex, gunned down in seconds. Some of the Assembly's own guards surrendered, hands raised, weapons thrown into the streets. Others ran, their gold-trimmed uniforms marked with blood. The people, the real people, emerged from underground shelters and homes with fear and wonder in their eyes. They'd lived under the Assembly's comfort, yes, but it had always been conditional. Any dissident voice was erased. Every freedom was filtered through fear. Now they looked to him, as if unsure whether to cheer or hide. He just walked past them, toward the spire. The spire was the true heart of the Assembly, a vast tower of white crystal and steel, where laws had been written in the language of control and dressed as peace. It shimmered like untouched snow, but he knew what was buried beneath it. As he entered the outer gates, they found the last resistance, 10 elite guards standing firm with ceremonial spears and plasma sidearms. They didn't fire. They didn't speak. He stepped forward, eyes hard. "You stand for them?" he asked. One of the guards, a tall one with faded medals across his chest, spoke quietly. I was born here, raised in this uniform. I believed in it. And now? The man hesitated. Now I see it for what it was. The other guards lowered their weapons. The gates opened. Inside, the assembly chamber was deserted. No applause, no gathered crowd, no proud orators, just dust and echoes, and a single woman sitting at the central dais, Counselor Nelia Odrin, the last remaining prime. Her hair was gray now, her face tired. She didn't flinch when he entered. She didn't even rise. "You've won," she said. "Is that what you want to hear?" He approached, each step echoing through the grand chamber. "I didn't come for words," he said. "Then shoot me." He stared at her, then reached into his coat. Not for a weapon, for a crystal. He activated it, and the chamber was filled with the sounds of the vault, the voices, the orders, the sanctioned genocide. It played without pause. She watched her own crimes replayed in front of her. And she wept. "I tried to protect the order," she whispered, "even if it meant blood." "You didn't protect order," he replied. "You buried the truth." She looked up at him through her tears. "Then finish it. Do what you came to do." He shook his head. "No." He stepped back and gestured to the doorway. "They're coming," he said. "Every system you crushed, every people you silenced. They'll put you on trial, in front of them all, and you'll listen to every scream you ignored." He turned his back on her and walked out. Outside, the people were gathering. Humans, aliens, children, elders, survivors. He stood at the spire's steps, overlooking the city. The sky above them was clearing now, the smoke thinning. For the first time in 1,000 years, there was no assembly signal broadcasting above their heads. Just silence. Then he spoke. Not to declare victory, but to end a sentence. "It's over." And the galaxy finally heard him.